What is up, everybody? Mr. Purse here. Welcome to 7.3. We're doing decolonization in India. Reminder, decolonization to end colonialism, to end imperialism. This is also known as nationalism in Vietnam. If you remember, nationalism can mean desire for your own country or the pride in your country. And in this case, the Vietnamese people are going to be asking or demanding or fighting for their independence. Let's just get rock and rolling here. Historical circumstance. I've mentioned this a million times. I'm going to keep mentioning it until the last video that we do for this year. Historical circumstance is the background that leads up to the situation that is in a document or whatnot. And in this case, the historical circumstance or the background is this area down here is known as Indochina. This is China right here. This is known as Indochina back during the time period of imperialism. Indochina below China or beneath China. And in this case, we have this area right here. Indochina was conquered by the French during imperialism. So we're going back to the 1800s. The French go in there during this period of imperialism when the Europeans are going out and conquering places, if you remember, because of nationalism, economic, religion, and social Darwinism. So the French go in here and they conquer Vietnam and Cambodia. So this area right here is modern day Vietnam, which is what we're going to focus on. And when the French conquer this, they treat this colony like we see what the British do in India, what is done in Ghana, what's done in different places around the world that were conquered by the Europeans, in that they take a certain select group of Vietnamese people and they bring them back to France to have them educated. So these Vietnamese people are going to universities in Paris, for example, and they're going to get educated in French ideas and French thought and French mathematics and science and blah, 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 blah. And then they are going to go back and they are going to help the French run the government in Vietnam. So these Vietnamese people are going to get educated in Enlightenment ideas and the French Revolution and freedoms and democracy and all that stuff. And then they come back to their country and they're like, bro, we are treated unfairly. We are second-class citizens in our own country. And it's going to lead to this feeling of nationalism. To what makes it even worse is, just like we see in India, what we see in Africa is World War I breaks out and the people of the colony are asked to help fight for the French in World War I in the trenches. And these people are going to say, yes, we will fight if you promise us our independence. And they promise their independence. And then the war ends and they don't get their independence. This is going to lead to an increase in nationalism, an increase in desire to have their own country. So the result of this education of the world wars is going to lead to this. Also, during World War II, so we're fast forwarding a little bit, during World War II, the Japanese come in and they conquer Vietnam. As a result of this, when the war is over, World War II, Japan loses World War II. Hopefully you remember that. And the question becomes, what do we do with Vietnam? This is the question that is around the world. Remember, it was, what do we do with Germany? What do we do with Japan? What do we do with China? What do we do with all of these countries that were conquered by the Axis powers? And in this case, what do we do with Vietnam? And when the war ends, the French decide we're going to come back and reconquer Vietnam. Now, you'd think that it would be like, okay, like we see in Korea, for example, let's just split it in half. And let's just split Germany in half. And in this case, the French are like, no, we're going to go back in and we're going to reconquer Vietnam. We're going to kick out the Japanese who conquered Vietnam, and now we're going to go in and conquer them. And the Vietnamese people who are there are like, oh, no, 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 you're not reconquering us. We are going to fight a war against you. We are going to actively, violently resist you. And when I say violent, usually we think violence in a negative way. In this case, they're like, we don't want you here. We're not going to peacefully protest your soldiers coming back in and reconquering. We're going to actively fight. And it is known as the anti-French, against the French, resistance, to resist something, war. And this lasts from right after World War II, which is 1946, until 1954. And you can imagine the French, who are a lot of the wars fought in France, don't have a lot of soldiers to bring. And in this case, the Vietnamese people, not only are they on their home turf, they have an advantage of numbers and size and all that stuff. And in this case, the leader of this anti-French resistance movement is a man by the name of Ho Chi Minh. Last name first in Vietnam, similar to China. So Ho is his last name. Chi Minh is his given name. So he is also known just by not trying to find, just by known as Ho. So you can refer to him as that. He is a Vietnamese communist leader. So he believes in redistribution of wealth, that we should have everyone equal, that we should all work together for a better society. This is him. This is actually him at the Treaty of Versailles after World War I, demanding that the Vietnamese gain their independence, and they don't give it to him. So he gets angry and leads to nationalism. And after World War II, he is the leader in Vietnam and leads this war. And what ends up happening is the war is, the French say, all right, we're out of here, but let's make sure we don't let it go fully communist. So they split it. North becomes communist, South becomes democratic. Same thing, everybody, as Korea. Same thing as Germany. We're splitting the country in half. However, so the North is communist, the South is democratic. However, another war breaks out because the South, this new democratic government, is super corrupt. All right. So it is corrupt. It's stealing money from people. It's not treating people fairly. It's arresting people. It's doing all kinds of stuff. And it's backed by the United States. However, the North, which is backed by the Soviet Union, which is backed by China, who are two communist countries, right? So we have the North, communist. I'm going to put it up here. North, which is communist, it is the Soviet Union and China who are going to back this. The South, which is democratic, which is going to be backed by the United States. Remember, we're talking Cold War, everybody. And the U.S. sends soldiers in to help the South. And the North is going to say, we're going to invade the South, and then the South invades the North, and we have a war breakout. And the U.S. is going to send soldiers in to stop the South from going communist. And the theory was known as the domino theory. And the U.S. believed that if one country fell to communism, so in this case, if Vietnam falls to communism, all these other countries around Vietnam are also going to turn communist. And we have to make sure, that's called the domino theory. And if you ever lined up dominoes, and they knock down and one topples and then the next topples and the next topples, that was the theory in the United States, that if Vietnam goes communist, everything else is going to fall communist. So the U.S. sends in soldiers and more soldiers and more soldiers and more soldiers. And over the course of 15 years, the U.S. fights in this war that's referred to as the Vietnam War. It's the second war that's fought in Vietnam over the course of, 3 decades. And the U.S. Loses this war, and Vietnam ends up going communist, and it is still communist today. And it is not communist like North Korea. It is a communist country that you can travel to. But it is a communist country. So millions of people died between these two wars. Tens of thousands of American soldiers died. Lots of people in Vietnam died. And this was kind of Ho Chi Minh's theory in this. You can kill 10 of our men for every one we kill of yours, but even at those odds, you will lose and we will win. And that's essentially what happened. The tide turned against the U.S. We'll talk more about the protests, the Vietnam protests in the United States, and some of the music that came out of this in class. But just a quick little summary of that. Again, the theme here is more violent resistance as opposed to India, which was peaceful resistance. Both achieved their goals. Also, communism versus democracy is involved in this as well. That's my wrap up. You got any questions? You write it down. You let me know.